Hello. I'm here to bring you an urgent message about a quite phenomenal cast of stars set to make a momentous appearance this weekend. Never glimpsed together before, these and many more of the biggest stars on the planet will be converging for the Royal Variety Performance and the Sports Review of the Year. You can observe them, without a telescope, by tuning into BBC One. That's the Royal Variety Performance on Saturday at 7:15 p.m. and the Sports Review of the Year on Sunday at 7:45 p.m. Astronomically important viewing on BBC One.
In 5 minutes on BBC Two, there's the final part of the portrait of the Norwegian artist Edvard Munch. Here on One in 10 minutes, in place of Law and Order, there's a special repeat showing of the Panorama programme that highlighted the case of Cardiff 3, who were released from prison today. But now back to Sue Cook and Nick Ross in the Crimewatch studio.
Welcome back. All the phones around here are pretty busy at the moment, but having said that, it's not been quite so frantic tonight as it was this time last month. Even so, on one case, 5 calls have caused what's been described as a stir in the incident room. In at least one case, 3 people have given the same name, and in another, we have multiple identifications of 2 people that detectives have been looking for, so it looks pretty promising. Sue.
Well, first of all, the rather complicated investigation into the murder of Kevin Cohn. Kevin was a professional lorry driver who'd been working recently on a casual basis through agencies in Nottinghamshire. He was last seen outside his local off-licence at about 6 o'clock on the evening of Sunday the 4th of October. And Mr Shepherd, the reason I say the investigation is complicated is that Kevin had travelled so widely and he'd had a drugs habit, so he had a lot to get through. Have you heard from many people who have known Kevin in the past few years?
Yes, particularly 5 calls that we've had. It throws a lot of information forward to us concerning his movements in Kent and the south of England. We've found one man who gave him accommodation overnight. All this has got to be followed up, but I'm very encouraged by it, and I'm hoping the calls are going to keep flowing in.
Now, Kevin being quite a complex character, you had quite a lot of gaps to fill in his life.
That's right, but we seem to be reaching the right people. We've had calls concerning drug offending, the motorcycle fraternity seem to be willing to speak to us, and as I've said, on the lorry driving side, we are getting people who are talking to us about his overnight stops.
So that's pretty promising. You also wanted to hear from anybody who might have seen Kevin on that last afternoon before he was found dead, and that was Sunday the 4th of October. He had a very distinctive car.
That's right. Unfortunately, we've had no help so far with that, although we have had sightings of the car, no sightings of Kevin himself. So I'm very encouraged by what we're getting, and I'm hoping it keeps going.
Right, well, we've got another half an hour, so please do call if you can.
We're fairly pressed for time as we look at photo call. Perhaps of the 5 cases, you could just pick out 2 or 3 for us, could you?
Perhaps we should start with the Building Society, Robert, the guy who went into the leads on the 26th of August. Over 30 calls, and would you believe all but 3 have given names and sometimes addresses as well. In fact, 1 name has been given twice. So the officers in the incident room at Wheatford would have lots of work to do there.
Thanks so much. We've got another one here.
Yeah.
You know what that is?
We'll have a look at that in a minute, I think. But the second one I wanted to mention first was the Greenwich knife attack. Although only about 15 people have responded, a good result looks promising as 3 viewers have suggested the same name, and several believe also that they've seen a man fitting the description in the Greenwich area. So I think we'll hear some good news about this one. Let's just have a look, see what's been passed. In fact, if you remember the case of David Leslie Speed, we believed he was conning women.
He was had 17 aliases, is that right?
That's him, yeah. Just had one, well, look at it, very interesting call from a person who's adamant they know him. In fact, they know him by one of those aliases. So perhaps if the officers are checking that out now, we'll have some good news on that.
Thank you, Jackie.
Well, Eric, how are we doing so far on Aladdin's Cave?
Well, we had one call from a gentleman who suggested his wife painted the naive picture, but I think she's got grounds for divorce because she'd have to have been born in about 1830. But good news on the clock front. I had a chat with a lady from Epsom Pretty sure this was stolen in Hove around about 4 months ago. Bearing in mind this is just the tip of the iceberg of a haul they've got in Brighton. That makes sense. Also, the tantalus, I didn't actually talk about it. A lot of these are about, but a lady mentioned certain damage on this, which is there. She says she's got the key, so a Cinderella situation. Let's see if it fits.
Could be the clincher.
Could be. The star brooch has attracted a lot of attention. I've had calls from all over, one from Malvern. The most interesting one came from a gentleman in Padiham near Burnley, and he related it to a robbery happened a few years ago, and it's a small world, sir, because I actually knew the victim of that robbery.
Well, that should be easy to check out then.
I hope so, fingers crossed.
Right, Eric, thank you.
Well, from a robbery in Burnley in Lancashire, let's go to one in Morecambe in Lancashire, one that almost turned into murder. The owner of a wool shop was attacked by 2 men, and thinking she was dead, they then set the place on fire. Mr. Kennedy, you seem to be pretty busy. How many calls have you had?
Well, we've had a lot of calls. I'm very pleased. We've had about 50 here and about 50 at our headquarters in Preston. The majority of those calls are suggesting identities for the 2 men, the Scouser and the Irishman. Now, some of the calls are from prison officers, from police officers who are basing those suggestions on things they know about the men for the previous convictions, as well as looking like the men. So I'm optimistic that we might have something at the end of the day.
Of the 2 men, man 1 and man 2, we call them, which are getting most of the calls? The Scouser was the one on the right, and the chap with the Irish accent, the chap on the left.
That's right. Undoubtedly, the man on the right, the man with the Liverpool accent, we're getting most suggestions for him. The other man, we haven't had just so many calls about.
And a lot of the calls coming from police officers and prison officers. What about the watch? The owner of the watch shop had a watch stolen. You were hoping that people would ring to identify someone who might have had that. It was an Oris gold link watch with a white oval face.
Yes, that's right, Nick. It was a watch which Mrs. Lucas bought in Egypt in 1980, and we weren't sure just how common it was in this country. And we've only had 2 or 3 calls, which would suggest perhaps it's not that common a watch. So anyone who could who's seen a watch like that and possibly put it with 2 men fitting that description, we'd like to hear from them now.
OK, Mr. Kennedy, thank you.
Well, there's been some progress on 2 of our incident desk cases so far. First of all, the attempted robbery witnessed by security camera in the jewellery shop in Bath.
Yes, Sue, had an excellent response there, over 50 calls in fact, and one of them in particular ties in with other clues and especially with the area that we're concerned with, so the officers are pretty excited about that. What we're still waiting for though is someone to call in and identify if they've owned this weapon. It's an APIS pump-action shotgun, and we want to know if you've owned it since 1989. Don't worry about any registration offences connected with firearms, we're not interested in that. This weapon was used in an attempt murder or an attempt robbery, and what we need to know is how it got to the people involved in the robbery. So call us if you can help.
All right. And secondly, the assault on a woman motorist 2 months ago in Blackheath in south-east London.
Yes, the phones are going mad at Lewisham. We've had lots of calls, a lot of names suggested, and many of them are local to the South London area. We've also had other calls coming in that seem to suggest similar types of MO that's committed on the crime. So other similar offences are being reported to us that look very interesting as well.
Great, so far so good. David, thank you very much indeed.
Well, now to that robbery in Frinton-on-Sea, where a post office van was hijacked by 2 men.
Now, just do what you're told, you'll be all right.
You heard him. Don't do anything stupid. Get over here.
Michael Hargreaves, at least 4 men involved in that robbery. We only had good descriptions of a couple of them. What sort of response have you had?
Well, we've had an amazing response, considering it was somewhat limited information. We've had approximately 70 or 80 calls here in this studio, and another 40 plus at Essex headquarters at Chelmsford.
Now, is there any pattern to the names that have been put forward?
There are some patterns. We have got repeat names on more than one occasion. So it's looking quite interesting.
OK, there are the people we're looking for. We don't know if they wear those glasses all the time or just did that for the robbery. The chap on the right is slightly younger. He's the one you've got most calls on, isn't it?
Yes.
And you want to link them with 2 cars, a white Sierra, but above all a black Alfa Romeo.
Yes, because the Alfa Romeo is a more unusual car. We're very interested in who was using that car prior to the robbery in August, and whether anybody has seen somebody using it since.
And the white Sierra, somebody must have made up the false number plates for that, but you haven't found them yet, have you?
No, we haven't found either of the cars, but it's very, very likely somebody has made up false plates for that white Sierra.
Yeah, quite an interesting, in fact, I think quite an exciting call on that, but I don't think you want to tell us much more about that.
Well, yes, there are some calls like that. Yes.
Sue?
Well, that's it for this month. Thank you very much to everybody who's called to help. If you haven't been able to get through yet, our lines are still open. There's just over half an hour left before they close. But the individual contact numbers for the police will be manned continuously 24 hours a day, and they'll be on the screen in just a moment. Next time we see you will be well into 1993. So a very happy Christmas and a happy New Year to you. Good night.
Don't have nightmares, do sleep well. Until January the 21st. Good night.
Christmas on BBC One.
How bad is she? Bad? What do you mean, bad? This woman's dead.
Bad news travels fast, even in St Mary Mead.
Mrs. Badcock died from barbiturate poisoning aggravated by alcohol.
This is someone very, very crazy.
Can you get me out of here?
Different city, different country. Same old Lovejoy.
Don't let a whiff of buried treasure and a pretty ankle turn your heads.
I don't think you came to Prague because of a woman, Mr. Lovejoy. I think you came because of these.
A story of love, friendship, and betrayal.
Can Kaiser and Jaden come to my party? Black crows, peep inside the window. Black crows, peep inside the window.
From a childhood paradise, The Hummingbird Tree, part of an outstanding season of drama for Christmas on BBC One.
Back to tonight now, and in place of the scheduled programme, we're showing the edition of Panorama, which first revealed the controversies surrounding the Cardiff murder case, leading to today's release of the so-called Cardiff 3. Introducing the programme tonight, Tom Mangold, who first reported the story.
To the cheers of their relatives and friends, 3 men walk away from their life sentences for murder as the Lord Chief Justice rules that their convictions 2 years ago were unsafe and unsatisfactory. It is the end of yet another highly controversial police prosecution that convinced a jury but failed to convince the Court of Appeal. Exactly 1 year ago, a Panorama team were based in Cardiff, locked into the intricacies of the savage murder of a Bute Town prostitute. 3 men, none of them with good reputations, had been convicted of her murder. The circumstances and locations were unglamorous and sordid. The crime had attracted little national attention, nor indeed had the court case. Yet the more we tested the fabric of the police case against the 3 men, the more it seemed to tear on touch. The most controversial aspect of the case was the manner of the police questioning of this man, Stephen Miller. Details of his grueling interrogation were first reported in tonight's film, and it was this issue, more than any other, which led directly to the Lord Chief Justice's decision to free the men. An official police tape recording of those interviews was played in court, and Lord Taylor said of it, "Each member of the court is horrified at hearing that tape." When the case against Miller collapsed, so did the case against the other 2 men. What you're about to see is a film that contains considerably more evidence than was heard by the Court of Appeal, evidence which, when taken as a whole, led us to the same conclusion as the Court of Appeal. Incidentally, one important implication of today's judgment is that the brutal killer of Lynette White remains at large. I should add that the film does contain some distressing scenes. So here then is Panorama's edition of February the 24th this year.
Cardiff, 1988, a changing city, its horizons expanding as much of the old docklands in Tiger Bay loses its notoriety to the developers' shiny new structures. But in one street in Butte Town, the past still clings stubbornly to the damp streets. On February the 15th, 1988, someone walked through the door of this house to keep an appointment upstairs. Then climbed to the first floor flat, which was being used as a brothel. Inside the darkened bedroom, Lynette White, a young prostitute, was waiting. There were screams and then silence. Lynette White's fully clothed body was found 20 hours later. She'd been dragged to the floor between the bare bed and the window. There was an unused condom and money on her bed. An arc of bloodstains had sprayed against the wall and bed. An unidentified palm print was found on the wallpaper. There were further bloodstains under the window and on the skirting board. Blood that was not the victim's had been found smeared on the bottom of her jeans. She had been stabbed over 50 times in a frenzied attack. All the evidence suggested that neither sex nor robbery were obvious motives.
We had a call in the evening, and I drove down by car with my colleague. And in the corner nearest the window was the body of a girl with obviously very severe injuries and a lot of blood about her. I think she had her throat cut more than once because it was a very ragged wound with multiple tails on the neck wound. And either before that, but probably after that, she had multiple stab wounds, some of which were inevitably after she was well and truly dead because they didn't bleed at all.
For nearly a year, Butte Town was gripped by nervous apprehension as police grappled with the mystery. Then suddenly, South Wales detectives charged 5 local men with the slaying. All denied the accusation. 3 were sentenced to life and 2 were found not guilty and freed. But the release of Ronald Actie after 2 years on remand was only the beginning of a new chapter in the story.
Person killed Lynette White and out on the street. Still walking the street. They walk in the street. They are innocent men in there. Innocent men.
It was like being born again, you know. They've given me my freedom back. You know, I've been in there for 2 years. It was like living in hell for 2 years. 2 years, like the end of the world, you know. Everything is on top of you, everything against you. And then, I mean, to just suddenly be released like that, it was just something else. It was special, you know, a very special day. Happiest day of my life.
When his cousin John Actie emerged from court to a similar emotional welcome, the questions which had plagued the whole investigation began to be asked with greater urgency. Since the Actie cousins were found not guilty, controversy has grown around the case. This was a murder in which the police were unable to produce a credible motive. There was no forensic evidence against the accused. The prosecution had to rely on witnesses who were admitted liars and a confession obtained by debatable methods. Next month, there'll be an appeal asking, in essence, whether the convictions of all 3 men are really safe. But the case has wider implications still. After a series of convictions depending on uncorroborated confessions were revealed as notorious miscarriages of justice, the law was changed to strengthen the rights suspects under police interrogation. The new rules, known as PACE, were enforced during the South Wales police investigation. But a closer look at the evidence suggests the PACE safeguards may have failed in this case. South Wales CID have declined to assist in the making of this film.
£5 the line, ladies, £10 the house, big bloody.
Cardiff Docks Butte Town community has shrunk to an enclave of just a few thousand. Time still bows to working-class tradition in a waterfront village of large extended families. There is a long history of racial harmony here. Many locals have gone to the suburbs, others stubbornly resist change. The sons of Caribbean cooks and Somali stokers live in a Butte town that still retains its spirit, but little of the wealth of its earlier mercantile greatness. There is some crime here, but the apparently motiveless murder of a young prostitute shocked the neighborhood. Prostitute murders are often difficult to solve. There are too many casual contacts, too much furtive behavior. But in Cardiff, detectives led by a CID chief with an unbroken record of solving murders had an early lead. Witnesses had seen an obvious suspect right outside the murder house within hours of the killing.
We got out of the car and we saw this strange-looking man just here. And he was obviously in a state, he was distressed, he was catching himself and appeared to be trying to hide his hand inside his coat. And his hand had blood on it, it was evidently injured.
This actor played the mysterious white suspect 3 months later when BBC's Crimewatch featured the murder. The man with blood on his hands was seen by several witnesses outside the dead girl's flat. As far as the police inquiry was concerned, there was then little doubt that he was their man.
The man seen virtually outside the flat that she used to take time to must be the prime suspect. The man was mumbling, incoherent. I gather he was crying at times too, blood on his hands.
That is right. He certainly is a person who we must speak to at this time. He's about 35 to 40 years of age and between 5'8" and 6 foot tall. And we must remember that this man was bleeding himself, he's cut himself, he's also got blood on him from the deceased.
But the months passed, the white suspect was never found, and the inquiry began to drag into investigative deadlock. There was no lack of cooperation, but no one in Butte Town seemed to know anything. Neither the traditional community nor the new arrivals, lured by smart new waterfront homes, wanted to inhabit a Butte Town over which hung the odium of an unsolved prostitute murder. Then quite suddenly, Cardiff police got a sensational break. In November, 3 key witnesses all came forward at the same time, told police that they'd lied in their original statements, and the 2 women confessed some involvement in the killing. They were a prostitute and close friend of the murdered girl, Leanne Vilday, Angela Pasila, another prostitute and former flatmate of Vilday's, and Mark Gromick, a petty criminal who lived in the flat above the dead woman. They named not the white suspect, but 5 black men. Ronald Actie, one of the well-known local faces in Butte Town. His cousin John Actie, also well-known and a man with previous criminal convictions. Tony Paris, another local man with only a shoplifting conviction behind him. Yusuf Abdullahi, Cardiff-born, a petty criminal. And Stephen Miller, a Londoner who was Lynette White's boyfriend. Of the 3 witnesses, the most important was Leanne Vilday, who now lives in hiding in Swansea. Vilday was a typical Butte Town prostitute, young, bisexual and feckless. Her face still bears the marks of a dispute with her lesbian lover. Like many of her colleagues, she lived a dangerous and unglamorous life. She knew all the 5 accused men, was the lover of one, had a child by the relative of another. She rented out the flat in which Lynette's body was found and actually led police to the body. Then she says she lied to them for 10 months before suddenly and inexplicably coming up with a version of the murder which helped send 3 men to prison for life. Vilday claimed that she and Pasila had heard Lynette's screams in their flat across the road and had run the 70 yards to the house. The front door was already open and they ran up the stairs. They passed John Actie at the top of the landing and went into the murder room where they saw Lynette White lying on the floor between the bed and the window. In the room, the 2 prostitutes saw Ronald Actie by the door and Abdullahi standing a few feet further inside the room by the bed. Miller and Paris were standing by Lynette White. Paris was stabbing her in the chest. John Actie then came into the room and someone passed a knife to him with which he threatened Vilday, ordering her to cut Lynette White's wrists so that she would become involved in the murder, forcing her to keep quiet. Pasila was also ordered to mutilate Lynette. At one moment, a Paul Atkins, who was visiting his friend Gromick upstairs, came into the murder room too, saw what was happening and left. So at various stages during this version of the crime, there were between 4 to 8 people in the small murder room. Vilday even implicated one completely innocent man, but later admitted that this was a lie made up only because she hated him.
What I am trying to say, the word I'm trying to say is that I am not gay and I am not normal. The word I am looking for is, well, nobody's normal. Anybody that was normal wouldn't be sat there looking at me now, would they? I mean,
Nothing in Butte Town is ever quite what it seems. Between the bingo and the drag queens, there is a life that constantly crosses the line.
I am greedy, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like one sex. Indeed, I do like both. I am what you call bisexual. That is the word I am looking for. I am bisexual. Men and boys. It makes no difference to me whatsoever.
Leanne Vilday and the other witnesses against the defendants chose to live a life in which some compromise with the straight world was essential to survival. That, say the Butte Town locals, is the price prostitutes pay to stay on the streets. Leanne Vilday, say those who knew her well, was no exception to the rule.
She's a terrible liar. I mean, she's a prostitute. I mean, so they lie. They live a lie. They live a life of lies, you know. So it's nothing to stand up in court and lie.
Leanne Vilday's lover, Deborah Paul, another member of the gay community, was living with her at the time of the murder. They continued living together for 3 months afterwards. She recalls how Vilday complained about being constantly visited by murder squad detectives.
She just said, oh, some of the officers are really bugging me, like everywhere I go, they're there. You know, it was just sort of like, in a way, following her.
Do you think she had anything to do with the murder of Lynette White?
My personal opinion thinks I've never seen her mad. I've never seen her have a fight. If she have had any arguments with the other prostitutes or punters or whatever, they've either just give her a little slap like and just left it. But I don't think she can't even punch a wet echo. She's not incapable of doing anything like that, I don't think.
In an environment like Butte Town, all prostitutes are vulnerable to pressure from authority. Few can walk the beat long without reaching an accommodation with the police. Knowledge is power, and the court heard that Vilday had been a paid police informer.
They used to say to me, well, how come she hasn't got picked up? And I say, well, I don't know, maybe she's an informer. Maybe just picking up just to go around the corner, tell them whatever and let out. But every time she used to say to me, oh, I got picked up, I used to say, well, where's your charge sheet then? Oh, I lost it. Oh, I'd lost it in the next punter's car or whatever. She used just to lie, like, I believe she was a police informer.